Hello, this is Sherry Avila. I am your hostess today for Avila Fine Arts Lovers. And we have with us today as our guest the Skokie Northshore Sculpture Park. Before we begin our interview today, though, I'd like to thank all those senior networkers who are out there helping us on the camera, in the control room, and everywhere else. Joe Amos, Pops, William Brown, Bill Godomsky, Capitola Johnson, Bruce Jones, Tony LaCroix, Roger May, George O'Hare, Rose Pappas, Magnolia Stewart, Margaret Taylor, and Martha Wilson. Thank you, thank you, thank you for making our show always a success. And now I'd like to just make a few comments that if you're ever out driving and you're in Skokie and you drive down McCormick on the east side of McCormick from Dempster to Howard, are these wonderful sculptures. In fact, there are 70 sculptures as I understand. And with us today we have two guests to help us understand better more about some of those sculptures. And we have Sheila Ottinger on my extreme right. Sheila Ottinger has this wonderful necklace on. And she is going to, she's the vice president of the board of directors. And on my closest right, I have with me today Brooke Marler. And Brooke Marler is the director of the Skokie Northshore Sculpture Park. Now, we'd like to ask them a few questions. Sheila, could you please give us a brief history of the Skokie Northshore Sculpture Park?
Be happy to. First of all, the land on which the sculpture park sits is owned by the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. And over a long period of time, that land became very abused in the 60s and 70s. And long about 1980, the Metropolitan District went to the surrounding communities, particularly to the Village of Skokie, and asked if they would be interested in improving the land. And so the Village of Skokie set about landscaping and creating bicycle paths and parking lots. And at the same time, a group of private citizens incorporated as a not-for-profit and have an arrangement, a sublease, if you will, to display sculpture on the same land. So since 1988, we have been doing that. We have a board with a small group of volunteers who select the sculpture, install it, maintain it, and run an educational program to help the community understand contemporary sculpture.
Before we go on to our next question now, we'd like to look at a couple of these images because the images help us to understand better what the sculpture park is all about. The first image, Sheila, why don't you start talking about that first image there? It's image number 7, Blick's Second Breath.
Yes, this is a sculpture that's part now of the permanent collection of the sculpture park. It's called Second Breath, and it's by a British sculptor named Maurice Blick. The story behind this sculpture is a very powerful story. Blick, as a very young child, was in the concentration camps during World War II. He survived the camps with his mother and ended up in England, where he is today one of the foremost figurative sculptors. Just before this sculpture was done, he and his family returned to the area where he had been incarcerated, and it was, as you would imagine, a very moving experience. When he returned home, this group of sculptures that he did, talking about redemption and about second chances, were the result. And you can see by the extreme gesture that the figure is holding, this sense of just exaltation, if you will, and gratitude for a second life.
Now, Brooke, would you please tell us about the programs that are offered by the Skokie Northshore Sculpture Park?
I'd be happy to. The Sculpture Park offers educational programs to complement what we do in the park itself. We do two primarily, one which goes into the schools and works with children first grade through high school, and the other is a tour program. I'll talk about the Sculpture in the Classroom program first, which we're in the midst of right now in the spring. It has three components. The first part is that we go into the schools and we present a slide lecture. We give them an overview of sculpture at the park, and oftentimes we tie it into curriculum that the classroom instructor has perhaps requested. The next thing we do is bring the kids to the park and actually give them docent-guided tours, where they really get to interact with the work, where they get to experience it firsthand, and really come away with a greater appreciation for contemporary sculpture and knowing that this resource is in their community. Then we go back to the school and we do a hands-on arts project with them. And this can be, again, tied into the curriculum or strictly, pure art project. This program is offered free to the schools. There's no cost at all. We fundraise for the program ourselves, and that makes it very special, I think. We're offering this program in Skokie and the surrounding areas, Evanston, Lincolnwood, Rogers Park neighborhood of Chicago. It's very successful. We are reaching about 500 students annually through this program.
So you have a three-part or three-component program.
Mm-hmm.
One part of your program is to go into the schools and present the slide presentation about the sculptures and discuss them. And another part is to have a field trip with the students at the sculpture park.
Yes.
And the third component is when you come to the school and they do a hands-on art project.
Correct. Then the other program that we offer is Sundays in the Sculpture Park. And this is open free to the public, where we invite the public one Sunday per month. Our first tour is actually May 28th. And we will pick one section in the park where we have docents, volunteers that are trained to give these tours. We'll bring the public through the park, where we will discuss individually each of the sculptures, again, really giving the opportunity for the public to interact with the pieces, learn more about the history of the artists, and really come away with some knowledge about contemporary sculpture.
So these public tours are on a Sunday?
Yes.
And at what time?
They're at 1 p.m. I would advise anybody interested in coming on a tour to either go to the Sculpture Park's website, which is www.sculpturepark.org, or to telephone the Sculpture Park at 847-679-4265, and we would be happy to provide that information for exactly where to meet and all of those details.
Yes, and I'd like to say that that website you have is a wonderful website. It not only has directions on where to go and where to park and exactly where the sculpture park is located, but it does have wonderful images on it, and it explains the images, and it explains your programming too. So I hope all you folks out there will take a look at that website, www.sculpturepark.org.
Yes.
Org.
Org.
We always have to remember those last three letters. Now, Brooke, would you please tell us about the Gaul Sun Worshipper, image number 8?
This is a beautiful sculpture. It's a very moving sculpture. The artist is Ted Gaul, and his biography is interesting as well. Any of you that have been to the Sculpture Park or been up and down McCormick Boulevard are aware of the Felpro Corporation that's located right there. Ted Gaul was hired to be the artist in residence at Felpro, and he worked there for many years creating sculpture, that related to what Felpro did, which was to manufacture automobile gaskets. So working in this environment, he created a number of sculptures that we have in the park today, and this is one of them. This is a beautiful piece, a little over life size, of a Native American in the act of worshiping the sun. The sculpture faces west, which I think is particularly appropriate, and you really do get the sense of the awesome power of nature and the reverence that the Native Americans had for it. It is also a tour de force in terms of craftsmanship. If you look at the sculpture closely, you will see it's comprised of many, many hundreds of small pieces of cut sheet steel, that then is welded together. And it's fascinating how he actually creates the anatomy through these tiny pieces of metal. It's very labor intensive. Most sculptors, I think, would choose to cast a piece like this rather than weld it. but it's fascinating that he didn't. A really wonderful piece and one of the favorites of the park.
Well, thank you for explaining those sculptures, because as we look at these images, we understand them better, and when we go to the sculpture park, they'll have more meaning for us. Now, actually, I think also I've always heard that Felpro had a very good reputation for its employees, and I'm very impressed by the fact that they hired a sculptor full-time to use their, as I understand it, you said the catch was that he had to use their parts, their components that they manufactured. Is that correct?
Correct. To use the scrap or the byproducts of what they're producing, and to relate to what Felpro was all about.
And to relate to what Felpro was all about.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
But that's very interesting to have that opportunity as a sculptor to go into a company.
Oh, it's a dream.
And be able to use their parts and somehow create, what an opportunity for creativity. That's great. I love that. Now, how can interested persons get involved? I think everybody by now, after seeing these images, is thinking, wow, I'd like to either get involved in some way. So how can people get involved, Brooke, with the Skokie Northshore Sculpture Park?
Well, the Sculpture Park is a private nonprofit, and we do really, our success is based on volunteer work. So we encourage people that are interested to get in contact with us. You can contact us through our website at www.sculpturepark.org. You can email us directly at info@sculpturepark.org, or you can call us at 847-679-4265. Tell us about your interests, and we'll be happy to talk to you about what our needs are and see what we can do. There are many opportunities. We would love to have more volunteers.
Now, this next image, I understand, is also by Gall.
Mm-hmm.
The artist, sculptor we talked about that was hired by Felpro, correct?
Yes.
And this image is a fun image, and it's called Charger 1 and 2. It's image number 9. Brooke, would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
This is a wonderful piece. It's hard to believe it's by the same artist. It's so very different. But I think there's an underlying thread here, which is a tremendous sense of spirit. Whereas the Sun Worshipper was more reverential, this is spirited. It's a very dynamic piece. You have these two wonderful horses just galloping down the straightaway next to the river. It seems that they're completely at home, and it's appropriate for them to be there. They're brightly colored. They really stand out against the landscape. But they're also very sophisticated. While they're very simplified images, it's clear that the artist has an understanding of the anatomy of the horse, understands how to generate the sense of movement, and they're larger than life size, so they really have a lot of presence in the park. They're beloved by almost everybody. They just, as I said, they're just wonderfully whimsical and cheerful and moving.
Yes, I think that the Charger 1 and Charger 2 horses are very attractive to, particularly I would imagine, well, all ages. But I'm no doubt that children are immediately drawn to them, drawn to them, because children love color. I like color, so as you can see. Now, Sheila, well, how does the Sculpture Park determine which sculptures will go on view in the park?
Well, we have, as part of our board, a sculpture selection committee, and interested artists can send us a packet by mail or through email with images of the work that they have available and some background about their career as a sculptor. And the selection committee then will evaluate what comes in and determine whether a particular artist's work is something that we would like to display. There's a lot of factors that are involved. First and foremost, of course, is aesthetics. Does the piece appeal to us on an aesthetic level? And it's amazing that when the group will get together, there's often a great deal of consensus. Even though tastes vary, the quality becomes almost obvious. But besides that, we also are concerned with the safety of a piece. We are in a public, unsupervised place, and it's important that we don't present any danger to the public. And also, we're outdoors in Chicago, and therefore we need to have work that can be sustained through winter and summer and rain and snow and so forth. We also are looking to try to have as much variety as possible, and both in subject matter, in media. We do have a lot of metal sculptures because metal seems to be the most frequently used material and one that is suitable for outdoors. But we look for as much variety as possible. We have pieces in resin and ceramic and wood, as well as in metal.
So a person who's a sculptor would fill out an application.
Well, there isn't an application. Okay. There is an application process. If they go to the website, the information is there, or if they call, we can give them the information. Really, all they need to do is submit biographical and information and images. They can be on CDs, they can be emailed, they can be photographs or slides, so that the committee can get a good idea of what these people are able to do.
And it's a variety of different media. You said some are wood, some are metal, some are
stone. Right. We try to have examples of work in as many materials that are suitable for outdoor installation as possible.
Yes.
And when you say metal, metal isn't one thing either. There are cast pieces, there are fabricated pieces, there are pieces that are painted, there are pieces that are rusted. So there is quite a bit of variety, and there are pieces that are realistic, pieces that are extremely abstract, maybe just even formal with no subject matter at all. So we run the gamut from the easy to visualize to things that are more challenging, and where our tours and our classroom work help people to understand some of those more complicated pieces.
What's great about a variety like that is that it can appeal to everybody.
Exactly.
So while some people might be more prone to contemporary, or other people might be more prone to abstract.
That's true.
And you have a variety of all of that, and I think we've kind of tried to show that in these images, that some are contemporary and some are of different media too in our images. Now the next image, Sheila, would you like to tell us a little bit about It's by Patrick Mcdonald.
Yes.
And you can tell us more.
Well, one of the things that the Sculpture Selection Committee does is it looks periodically for a sculptor who can create a piece of work at the park. Generally, that would be a commission where we would not be borrowing a sculpture, which is something that we do also, but where we would be purchasing a sculpture from the artist, but having him create it on site. And that way, school groups and other groups of people can come and watch and interact with the artist, and it becomes really an event. And this was the case with Patrick Mcdonald. We commissioned him to do this sculpture. He came to the park with a crew and built a frame in that leaf-like shape. That piece, by the way, is quite tall. I think it's probably over 20 feet tall. And the frame was laid on the ground. A concrete truck came and poured concrete into the frame. The lighter colored aspect of that piece is solid concrete, the same material that sidewalks are made out of. And the metal parts of it were put in during the time that the concrete was wet. It was then wrapped up, allowed to cure, and then a month later, the crew came back with a crane, lifted the piece into a vertical position, and did the finishing work. All the while that Pat was talking to groups of school children, explaining himself. He's a guy with a great sense of humor. He titled the piece "We" with as many E's as we would like to add to the W, because he wanted it to be a joyous piece, one that people would get pleasure from seeing. It has no specific subject matter. It's there as a shape, as a form to be just enjoyed and sensed.
I think that Patrick Mcdonald must have had a lot of fun with all this interaction.
He did. He enjoys doing that sort of thing.
I think also that the students who came must have been thrilled, because it's very exciting to be able to see something take place right in front of our eyes.
Right. I think that the average person, child or not, seeing a completed sculpture has really no idea how it was created,
Yes.
and the opportunity to see the steps involved. And we've done this now 3 or 4 times, and we hope to do it again someday soon.
Yes, the opportunity to see it to the completion, from the beginning to the end, or in any part of it, is a great time.
Absolutely.
I think that's wonderful. Now, let's talk about another picture. Let's talk about Galushi's Next Millennium Gate. And Brooke, you're going to tell us about that. That's image 11.
Yes, this is Jim Galucci, Next Millennium Gate. It's a very interesting piece. It's very large, probably over 20 feet high, made of painted sheet steel, cut and welded together. And it's got this wonderful arch form with these piercings, these circular cutouts. In the center you will see what looks like a doorway, and I think that's intentional. The artist is very interested in the idea of a gateway or a portal, and you think about what that might mean. It means leaving one area or idea and moving to a next. Next millennium also refers to the year 2000, and a lot of artists were very fascinated with all of the interesting ideas behind that, changing of the millennium, and what could that mean? Does it mean anything, really? Time is also another factor that plays in this piece, and in some ways, Next Millennium Gate refers to the clock, the passage of time. So visually you see that in the piece. Also, that central arched sort of doorway it moves, so it actually can be spun around, and because of the size of it, you can actually walk through it and move it. So it adds another component to it that makes it very interesting for people, and young people also, to really enjoy it that way. So it brings up a lot of ideas and concepts that I think a lot of artists, contemporary artists, are thinking about today, and it packages it in a very attractive, beautiful piece.
Now, I think part of the attraction to me of the Skokie Northshore Sculpture Park is that it can be a fun place to be. We get to enjoy the grass and the trees, and the sculptures are kind of like the frosting on the cake, or the trees and the grass are the frosting on the cake. And it's interactive. You can be interactive. You can, like you said, with the Millennium Gate, you can go through the gate. Now, what should an artist do? Let's talk about your work. Sheila over here is an artist. In fact, she's wearing a necklace that she created. And in the Skokie Northshore Sculpture Park, there's actually a sculpture by her, by Sheila Ottinger, and it's called Reverie. So let's have Sheila tell us about her sculpture, Reverie.
Well, the sculpture Reverie is made out of clay, and it was a piece that I created specifically for the park. I was asked to cite a piece. This goes back about 12, 13 years ago, and I built the piece all in one large form of clay. I used models to make the initial planning, and actually for the portrait part of it, and so forth. My challenge was that here I had a 7-foot tall realistic figure, and there's no kiln that I have access to that's 7 feet tall. So once I finished modeling my piece, I needed to cut it up, hollow it out, fire it, and then put it back together again. And once that was done, it was moved and brought into the park. It's a piece that I wanted to give the impression of someone who was comfortable, someone who was communing with nature, that was really belonged in this park, in this natural setting. And I think that a lot of people who come to the park see a lot of that in the piece. Actually, there's an amusing story about my sculpture. When I first put the piece in, I was very excited and went by on a regular basis to look and see how it was doing. And I was forever finding white spots all over the piece. I had particularly wanted the piece not to be sited under a tree to avoid having those white spots. And it turned out that this had become a regular perching place for some of the local birds. And I was going every couple weeks with a pail and brushes and washing off all of the bird droppings that were on the piece. Eventually, I got a brilliant idea to put a product called Roost No More onto the top of the figure, and lo and behold, that worked. The birds stopped coming. Unfortunately, one bird did come, landed on the top of the sculpture, and couldn't get off. And somebody called the local animal department, who called me to try to get this gunk that was on top of the sculpture head off the bird's feet. And all this did get accomplished, and eventually I went back and removed what was left of that stuff off the head of the sculpture. But I always chuckle when I go by, because from that day, which was at least 10 years ago, to now, there has never been another drop of bird poop on my sculpture. So I think that that bird passed the word around through the entire bird community.
So that brings us to the challenge of having sculptures outdoors, and some of the problems that arise from that, such as what you described, having outside animals that are might, in this case, birds, of course.
Well, the sculpture park has been extraordinarily fortunate. We are in a very visible public place. We're surrounded by a lot of residential area, as well as a well-traveled street, and we have many people who love our park and keep tabs on it. We have had very, very little vandalism or problems of any kind. If we find occasionally that we've selected a sculpture that doesn't weather well, then that piece may not stay very long. But for the most part, the pieces stay very well. We have a wonderful man who works for the park, who does our maintenance and our conservation. He walks the park at least twice a month, checking on each piece, cleaning things that need to be cleaned, and so forth and so on.
Well, I don't know if we have time, but give your website real quick and your phone number.
www.sculpturepark.org. The telephone number is 847-679-4265.
Thank you. Now, I know you have lots of other sculptures there, so I hope those people out there are going to come and visit you.
Please come. Our season is just starting. The weather is turning beautiful. There is no nicer place in the area to take a walk, ride your bike, rollerblade, picnic, and see all around you this wonderful